conversation, by the way.
I'm glad you did. That's one in a row. Ted Shoebat is our guest this hour. His dad, Waleed, was a former PLO, quote-unquote, terrorist, found Christ, became a Christian, and has tried for his entire life since to make sense of and bring peace to a troubled part of the world. His son is with us, Ted, Theodore. And Ted, how are you?
I'm good. Yourself?
I'm fine. Thank you for joining us.
No problem.
We had some discussion of this in the last sector, but I'll ask you to comment about, in your opinion, what happened in Bengazi.
Well, what happened in Bengazi is you had really a network of attacks. It's no coincidence. For example, it's really no coincidence that you had spontaneous attacks in Africa and in Indonesia all within 1 or 2 days. You had, for example, the attack in Libya and Bengazi. You had the one in Egypt. You had the one in North Sudan. You had the ones in Indonesia. It was a lot of rioting in Indonesia as well. So what was going on? It was a network attack. It was an attack. It was determined. It was premeditated, and it was done by people who were networking together. And the reason why I say that is because when you look at North Sudan, for example, it wasn't just people rising up and rioting on their own. They were being supported by the government. They were being supported by El Taib Mustafa, who is the uncle of Omar al-Bashir, the president of North Sudan. It was being funded by Omar al-Bashir himself. It was being supported by. And Omar al-Bashir and Mursi are very good friends. They're both part of the quote-unquote Arab Spring. And then also in Libya, we have a video that my father actually found, which we put on the website, Shoebat.com, of one of the terrorists in Libya who is with the rebels, is with these rebels. And as he bumps into them, he says, "Don't shoot. We were sent here by Mohammed Mursi, the president of Egypt." So there's no doubt in my mind that this was a premeditated attack. In fact, the embassy was attacked several times before that. The embassy, months before the attack, asked the U.S. government for more security, and the U.S. government actually denied their request.
Now,
go on.
Let me ask you, Ted, about this video. No one could argue that huge crowds, sometimes numbering more than 1 million people, of people in the Middle East, wherever they might be, have responded to alleged desecration of Qurans or insults to Muhammad or whatever.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that, please.
Well, that's a very good question. It happens all the time, actually, many times falsely. You have false accusations. For example, just a few days ago, there were 2 Coptic Christians that were arrested, 2 young boys, one 10 years old and one 9 years old, Nabil Razik and Mina Farang, 10 and 9-year-old boys who were thrown in prison because somebody accused them of desecrating the Quran, supposedly. What this leads to is despotism. It leads to a strong tyranny in the region. It leads to a collective tyranny because it is not only a tyranny from the government, it is also a tyranny from the masses. So it's the worst kind of tyranny. And let me just give you a few examples of what's going on in Egypt. In Egypt right now, you have the Christians that are living near the Sinai, all fleeing because you have mobs coming to kill them. You have, for example, Christians being threatened with leaflets saying you must evacuate or die. You have, and if they refuse to leave, you have men coming in with automatic rifles and opening fire on Christians, opening fire on Christian homes, and such and such. For example, also, to give you an illustration of this, on August 14th, El Fajr reported that leaflets were actually distributed in areas with large Christian populations, especially in the Upper Egypt region, and they're offering actually monetary rewards to Muslims. And I'll read to you the quote: "Whoever kills or physically attacks the enemies of the religion of Allah, or the Christians in all Egypt's provinces, the slaves of the cross, Allah's curse upon them." So there is a collective attack going on to Christians, and what they're doing is they're saying, well, the cops invented this video. And so this legitimizes our riotous behavior. It legitimizes us murdering these people, killing these people, tyrannizing these people. And that's what's going on, really.
All right. Again, I'm just trying to have you kind of lay the table out here.
Sure.
Before this video, there have been other videos or cartoons or alleged acts.
Yes.
I'd like you to tell me, I don't know if you've ever been Muslim. I know your dad was at one time, but
No,
you
I
know
have not.
many Muslim people. What is it in the Muslim faith throughout the Middle East and Indonesia, as we've heard, that would motivate people to put it all out there, to potentially lose their lives, lose their freedom, lose their homes, lose their possessions, to act in this way, and if they go out and kill people, whatever, they don't get anything out of it, I don't think. Tell us, please.
Right. Well, that's a very good point. People make it out to be that the reason why Muslims rise up and act violent and kill people is because, well, they say it's an economic issue, or these people are poor, these people are from the lower classes. Well, people need to understand it's not a physical matter. It's not a physical issue. This is a matter of the soul. It's a spiritual issue. This is a metaphysical ideology that teaches you that the greatest cause in the world is to die while killing the enemies of Allah. And this is something that's it's very difficult to explain in a secular manner. You have to use religion to explain what is going on with these people. It is a possession of the soul. In the Quran, for example, in Surah chapter 72, it says that when the demons were casted out of heaven, they heard the Quran and they converted to Islam. And Muhammad the Prophet in the Hadith says very clearly, every single Muslim is possessed with a legion of demons. And when my grandfather, when he was alive, he was a fundamentalist Muslim, he would tell me that he is possessed with demons and that he communicates with these demons and tries to convert them and bring them to Islam. And that if you can convert your demons to Islam, then they won't torment you anymore. So it's a very diabolical religion. And it's a possession of the soul. It's something it's impossible to explain it with a secular manner. You have to explain it with using spiritual words. You have to explain it as a spiritual matter.
Brent.
I think that's an excellent explanation. And by the way, my regards to your father, Ted.
Thank you, sir.
He was on my show at one point as well. And I hope he's doing all right. I hope he is safe.
He is.
I think what Ted has just explained is pristine. It is absolutely right on. The reason so many Americans today are unable to grasp what is going on in the Muslim world is because Americans have gotten away from the concept that God's law comes first. Whether it be Christian, Jewish, Muslim, God's law comes first. In America, it's not. We have a country that has actually said God's law is secondary to U.S. federal law. We have a country that's actually made rulings like that. So we have a people who for generations have grown up not believing that God comes first. So when you come upon a people who operate from that framework, that these are God's laws, you just don't understand it. You don't grasp it. It doesn't, it doesn't make sense to you. But when you start thinking of it that way, and there are some out there who would be called fundamentalist Christians. I'm not even necessarily talking about them, but they are an example here of people who believe God's word comes first. It's a different mindset than the modern day Western civilized modern society mentality. And I think Ted's right. You have to get more into understanding that mindset if you want to understand what the Muslim world is about. And I don't profess to understand it, but I think I have a greater understanding because I do understand this one point. Good point, Ted.
I would throw this point out.
Thank you.
The Judeo-Christian God is good, and the Muslim God is bad. So if you put God first and you use the Judeo-Christian God, you're going to love and be right. If you put God first and use the Muslim God, you're going to kill people, you're going to rape people, you're going to rob people.
And we don't put, even the Judeo-Christians, we don't put, as a society, God first.
I didn't say we did.
First.
I didn't say we did, but the point I'm trying to make is for those fundamental Christians, of which I am one, you do put God first. God is more important than money. Doing the right thing is more important than doing the profitable thing. The difference is in who is your God. And I say the Muslim God is just evil, and that's why Muslim people do evil things. That's my opinion. Chief?
Well, we mentioned earlier in the other segment that's before this about diplomacy, and so this, to me, really illustrates that there can be no real true diplomatic negotiations with Islamic fundamentalists because they're going to rely on their religion rather than any type of negotiation. So if their goal is to either Muslimize us or kill us, there's not much to negotiate. I'd like to throw this out as an example because I don't think that most Americans can even fathom this, but here's an example that I think we can understand. So if we talk about child molesters, for example, and we talk about there's no negotiation with them. True child molesters can never be rehabilitated. They're always going to go back to molesting children. So whether they get treatment or whatever, so if we try to have some type of diplomatic negotiation with them to get them to quit molesting children and turn them loose, they're going to molest children again. So I believe that the Muslims that we're talking about are the same exact way. No matter what we say or try to do, they're going to be back to doing what they do.
All right, Ted.
Pardon me, Stan, if I may just very quickly. The comment, Steve, that Stan and I were talking about with the negotiations was on the premise, if China invaded the Muslim world, what would we do about that? So I just want to say, it was more negotiation with China than it was negotiation with Muslims about their philosophy.
Yeah, well said. All right. Ted, let me ask you, from your learned, focused perspective, paint a picture of the future if Barack Obama is reelected, and paint a picture of the future if Barack Obama is defeated, because that's what this election is about. It has really little to do with Romney and more to do with yes or no to President Obama, in my opinion. Your thoughts?
It's a good question. Well, go back to the Carter years when the Iranian government had those Americans kidnapped. Those Americans were in captivity for quite some time. It wasn't until the last minute after or before Reagan's election, which they knew Reagan was going to win. And the Iranians said it themselves. We need to release these Americans because we have a Republican who's going to be in office. The reason why the Iranians felt strong about keeping the American prisoners was because Carter was in office. So apparently what's going to happen is if Obama wins, the Muslim Brotherhood will feel empowered. They'll be very, very confident. What Obama did when he spoke in Egypt in the beginning of his election, at the beginning of his presidency, is he said, we are willing to work with the Muslim Brotherhood, and that empowered them even more. Because the Muslim Brotherhood, as we all know, was illegal. It was an outlawed group in Egypt. Members of the Muslim Brotherhood were being executed. They were having their ribs broken by the Egyptian government because Mubarak knew that they were bad news. So, as soon as, if Obama wins, they'll be more empowered. Also, you're going to see a further persecution of the Copts, unlike anything we've seen in the modern world, I believe. The Copts have been living there for thousands of years, and once you had the Islamic invasion, there was immense persecution in the 14th century, 15th century, and before that. But in the 1920s, things calmed down because you had Arab nationalism. You had Nasser, the presidency of Nasser, and his successors after him. But now we are seeing a new Egypt. The Muslim Brotherhood is rising up. They want to slaughter all the Copts. They want to keep them in captivity. In fact, in this report that I read to you, it also states that you've had Muslims going into Christian villages saying, pay the jizya tax or die. And Copts who refuse to pay the jizya are killed or kidnapped. For example, the jizya, if you guys don't know what that is, the jizya is Islamic tax on non-believers or dhimmis. So like I said, it's a collectivist tyranny in which if you are not a part of the Islamic community or the ummah, you are considered worthy of death, worthy of slavery, worthy of subjugation. And in my book that I wrote on this, For God or for Tyranny, it talks a lot about Islamic tyranny if you really want to understand what that is. So as long as you have Mohammed Mursi in power, you're going to see a holocaust of the Copts. I think that this is going to happen regardless of who wins the election, whether it be Romney or Obama. But the only difference I would say is that if Romney wins, there'll be less confidence amongst the Islamic fundamentalists, as opposed to if Obama is in office.
Talk about Israel then in that same context.
Well, Israel, that's a good question. You have Syria, which is people are saying, well, the Assad regime is a major threat to to Israel, and it's not really, actually. The Israelis are worried right now about a toppling of the Assad regime. If the rebels win in Syria, the Israelis know that Islamic fundamentalists will get their hands on the chemical weaponry of the Assad regime. And if you study something about Syria, we know that Syria is one of the most armed, if not the most well-armed Muslim country in the Middle East. They have very, very high-tech chemical weapons. So Israel is not worried about Assad because they know that Assad is not stupid enough to strike Israel. They are worried about the rebels getting their hands on it. So we need to pay attention to Syria right now. We really do, because there's a lot of Islamicism going on in Syria. The revolution is an Islamist revolution. It's not a secular revolution, as opposed to what CNN wanted us to believe. It's an Islamist one that wants to take over the current government, implement Sharia law, massacre the Shiite population because it is a Sunni revolution, and they also want to massacre the Christian population. Just weeks ago, there was a Christian village of Rabla, which they kidnapped around 280-something Christians. And then some reports say it was 250, but regardless, it's over 200 people. And they're keeping them there. You have terrorist groups coming in from Lebanon. One of them is called Ahmed Amoun, which was responsible for the taking of this village. And they're coming in from Lebanon, supporting the rebellion. So you have people from Afghanistan, people from Bangladesh, Chechnya, Lebanon, Iraq, Chechnya, Albania, all these different countries flooding into Syria, trying to topple the Assad regime. Unfortunately, we have the American government that is supporting the revolution. And then also to add one more thing about the Syrian revolution, just to show you how anti-American this revolution is, look up Austin Tice. Austin Tice was an American Marine who did 2 tours, one in Afghanistan, one in Iraq. He became a journalist, went to Syria, and now he's missing. He was missing 2 months ago. Then a few days ago, they released a video of him in captivity, blindfolded, in the hands of rebels. And he is made to say the Shahadatan, there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. And then he is screaming, "Oh Jesus, oh Jesus, oh Jesus," and the video cuts off. I have a strong feeling that they executed him. We can't be conclusive, but I pray to God that they release him, and I hope that nothing bad has happened to him.
Wow. All right, Chief.
Well, it's just a very scary situation. And again, most Americans don't understand any of this. They do not understand the severity of this. There also was, we had discussed earlier about the supporting the rebels, and I want to bring up the fact that Mitt Romney did mention that he would support rebels, but he did make the caveat that they would be rebels that had our best interests in mind. So I would assume from what he said was if he can't find those, he won't support any of them.
Well, not supporting them or supporting them is not nearly as important as, in my opinion, Brent will probably disagree, looking at what it will mean, because if Syria falls, Jordan will be gone in 2 weeks. Jordan doesn't have the strength that Syria has. Then Israel will be surrounded, and Israel has what they call the Samson option. Are you familiar with that, Ted?
No, I'm not, sir.
Well, the Samson option, as you remember, when Samson was blinded and captured by the Philistines,
yes.
In order to mock him, they put him in their main temple. I'm not sure, but I think Michelle was there. At any rate, they put him between the 2 supporting pillars, and he decided to, quote-unquote, bring the house down. Now, he died in the process, but he killed all of the Philistine leaders and ended their reign as a power because there was no one left to lead the rabble. Right. Israel has what is called the Samson option. Everyone knows that they are armed with multiple nuclear weaponry, and they have said, both publicly and privately, if they are attacked and they can't survive, they're going to take out the entire Middle East and take a couple 100 million people with them. Have you not heard that?
No, I have not, sir. I'm sorry to say that.
Well, you might investigate it because your contacts are dramatically good. Mine are very good inside of Israel. I don't have any to speak of outside of Israel. But you do mention something about the Christians. Lebanon at one time was a quote-unquote Christian country. What's happened to the Christians in Lebanon?
Well, Lebanon is getting more and more, well, the preponderating power in Lebanon is becoming more and more Islamic. You have Hezbollah in Lebanon. And so pretty soon, you're going to have Hezbollah take control of the country. It's apparent that this is going to happen. You have Christians leaving that nation. In fact, I've talked with an Armenian Christian family, I can't give their names, from Lebanon, and they were telling me that they had to leave because it was getting so violent. The Christians in Lebanon live in their own communities, but it's actually quite dangerous for them once they leave those gated communities in which they reside in. So Lebanon, you're right, it used to be a very Christian country. In fact, it used to be illegal for any Muslim to run for the presidency in Lebanon. So it had to be Christian, and we said, well, that's racist, that's discrimination. Well, they had no choice; they had to for their own survival. But you had in the 70s, you had the Lebanese Civil War, which was one of the bloodiest wars in history. It really was. It lasted for quite some time, and entire cities were destroyed, buildings were collapsed. Just look up Lebanese Civil War on YouTube, and you will see the footage. Very, very graphic footage. So it just goes to show you what happens once you have an empowered Islamist thuggery group enter into a nation. They will help start a civil war, and that's exactly what's happened in Syria. Sadly to say, though, I think the Assad regime will not be remaining there for very long because the Turks are now getting involved heavily. The Turks have always supported the revolution, and the rebels were getting support from the Saudis and the people from Qatar and the Turks. But now, because the Turks feel as though that they have a huge interest in it, which they do, they are sending in their own troops into Syria. And Turkey is much, much more superior militarily than Syria. And so now that Turkey is giving their full assistance for the rebels, it's really impossible, I believe, for Assad to defeat the rebellion.
All right, we are out of time. Give folks a website, how they can contact you, watch your work, and support what you do.
Sure. They can come to my website at tedshoebat.com. We have lots of articles there. We report the news on it every day. We are updating it daily. And also you can get my book, For God or for Tyranny, When Nations Deny God's Natural Law. For God or for Tyranny. And they can get that book on Amazon.com.
Ted, thank you for your time and your insight.
Thanks for having me, sir.
Really
Anytime.
appreciate having you with us.
Anytime, sir. God bless.
All right, and to you. We'll be back shortly with Mike Velarde talking about economics. This is Talk to Solomon.